It's Tuesday, February 18th, 2014, and you're listening to SYN Boldly, the podcast of the Sign Your Name Project. I'm your host, Trey Comstock, and with me this week is just Stephen Doss.
Hi, everybody.
As Mrs. Kathleen Royston is in the process of preparing for commissioning interviews and is in need of a lot of prayer tonight, so keep Kathleen in your prayers. On tonight's actual episode, we'll be talking about how the Methodist Church is backing away from clergy trials, a Kickstarter movie about Frank Schaeffer, and a broader discussion of Christianity in the media, as there seems to be a ton of feature-length movies coming out featuring the Bible or theology.
Ah, sweet Jesus.
But we start tonight with the Methodist Church backing away from clergy trials in the news. So, Stephen, you brought this story in, so tell me what's going on. That fewer trials?
Yes, apparently, according to a recent report, I believe it was in the Reporter, they are going to...
They who?
The Methodist Church. Have decided that it wouldn't be in their best interest to go full-on trial mode for Tom Oglethorpe. The Yale...
So what, specifically, the Polity Net, specifically, what body within the church made this decision?
You know, I have no clue. I believe it was a conference decision.
So an annual conference, on the annual conference level? Okay.
On the annual conference letter, yes. And it's mainly because, number one, it's his son, and they're like, it's not prudent. Number two, he's not a Methodist minister anymore. He's retired, and he's done the Yale stuff for a while, and it's his son. But I think a big reason is the fact that apparently it costs upwards of around $100,000 to have a clergy trial.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
from the I believe that was from the same report. Yes. That. It costs to get everyone settled and to have this church trial. It's $100,000, and with the Methodist Church's not lack of funding, but the fact that
strange budgetary strains,
it's that can be pressing, especially if you bring up everyone that does things like this on charges. CalPAC, of course, has another idea of how to do that.
That's the California Pacific Annual Conference.
Thank you, Trey. They have been, in fact, just recently, they have handed down 2 punishments for ministers in who have been accused. I hate that word, but ministers that have done it, and they have made a conscious decision to say the only punishment we'll hand out if someone brings up charges, you will get a 24-hour suspension, and we're done.
Now they can't. Now, my understanding is, based on the judicial decisions from Baltimore, they can't have that be the official policy.
Right.
That can just be what seems to tend to happen.
Exactly.
Because technically, all punishments must be on the table. However, in reality, they can put unofficial restrictions and get away with it.
Exactly. And that's what this ultimately is an unofficial restriction. It's basically them saying... oh, yeah, we weighed all the options, and the most prudent one was this 24-hour suspension. It is without pay. So
sure. You lose a day's pay.
You lose a day's pay. But other than that, yeah, it seems as if certain conferences are trying to shy away from this whole witch hunt, and I think that is a very positive thing. I think ultimately it's a good reorganization of priorities in the Methodist Church by saying, hey, we're, for lack of a better word, wasting X amount of money because of these trials, and they're not accomplishing anything. The people who are going to perform these services are still going to perform them. The people who are going to be upset by them are still going to be upset by them, and it's like, last week's debate. You just get more entrenched in your position and nobody moves anything.
Well, so I found the press release on Reporter, because fact-checking is actually the death of podcasting. But,
yes, you need to stop that. I need to be able to make up wild accusations.
So from the Religious News Network, here reported in the the UM reporter. The trial of retired Methodist pastor and former Yale Divinity dean accused of breaking church law by performing a gay wedding has been delayed indefinitely. Bishop Clifton Ives, a retired Maine bishop overseeing the trial, and pastors overseeing the church, and Reverend Thomas Ogletree all agreed to pursue a, quote, just resolution, end quote, before resorting to a trial, said Reverend William S. Shillady, secretary of the trial court. So right now, no trial. They're going to try and find something else out. And that is a hugely costly thing.
Yes.
Witch hunts cost money, in short. And, this is probably not solely being done for financial reasons. I think, not just the finances, but just the PR beating.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been, it's been hard on the church as a whole. And, a lot of, why we started this show is to, be kind of this poignant reminder of we're not like that. But I think it does make it harder for a church as a corporate body to say we're not like that when we're constantly putting people on trial and carrying through with the trials. And, these trials making it onto CNN and, Wilf Blitzer's there. And then with the Methodist Church is put another person on trial, blah, blah, blah.
I'm Bernard Shaw. Is he still around?
Sure, who knows?
Okay, good.
But I think it is, it's a step in the right direction. And, their quote of find a just resolution.
Yeah.
That, fundamentally, as we've been reminded many times in this process, the church is just bad at trials.
Yeah.
We don't really have the infrastructure for it. It's not really what we do.
And the church's job isn't to do trials. It's to in the United Methodist Church official mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Yep.
And you can't really do that if you're bogged down in bureaucratic mumbo jumbo.
Right.
Which is what these trials are. It's like you have broken a rule. Let's see how bad you have broken said rule.
Well, and I think the court, in the end, if you look at the Frank Schaeffer trial, what the court decided almost didn't matter.
Right.
Right? So it wasn't actually what the court said that did anything. Because he basically said, I'm not going to abide by the court's ruling.
Right.
I will both not uphold the entire discipline, because that's quite literally impossible.
Yeah.
And I'm also not going to hand in my credentials. Right. You're going to have to take them from me. And they did. Right?
Yeah. And then CalPAC's, California Pacific, said, we'll give them back to you.
Right. Hey, come on. I got a job. Hey, dude. I got a job for you. You want a job? I got a job.
It's in construction.
It's in construction. You got to join the Teamsters Union.
You're going to be working half your time in construction, half your time in olive oil.
Yeah, if you know what I mean. Why did this become the
I have
mob?
no idea.
What did we do?
This is what happens when the lady isn't here.
Yeah. But I think my point is that not only are these trials damaging and expensive, in the case of Schaeffer, it was wildly ineffective.
Yeah.
He basically stood up to the court, and United Methodist Church had to show how truly unjust the situation was and say, okay, fine, we're just going to take them from you. We didn't want to have to do that because it was going to make us look worse. We were trying to push that off on you. And
ultimately, they had to do it.
No, they didn't.
Well, yeah, that's a horrible choice of words. But
they backed themselves into a corner, and they decided that this was the course of action they were going to take.
Exactly.
This was not, I understand that we have to stand by the decisions of our court. Okay, well, the decision of your court was crazy.
Yeah.
So he's guilty, but he's not defrocked really, but he has to essentially defrock himself.
It's his own fault if he gets defrocked.
It's own fault. And so it basically said, look, I can't uphold the entire discipline because as a court, you phrased that bad.
Yeah.
I understand what implicitly that meant. We talked about that night as the news broke. But I don't think they did a very good job of it.
So, Trey.
Yep.
Do you think this is a big turning point for the church as a whole? Is it going to be more LGBTQ friendly, at least in the sense of marriages, like performing marriages in church? In the church or by church members. I know we still have as the Methodist Church, we still have a few trials coming up for people who have been, quote, self-avowed practicing homosexuals. They're not quite pro yet, but one day they'll get there.
They're practicing.
Exactly.
I honestly, the trial I'm waiting to see is Bishop Talbert. Mm-hmm. To me, that's going to be the signal. Because that's having to play in the South rather than in the Northeast.
Right, because that was in Alabama.
So I'm interested to see what happens with that trial before I'm going to start looking at trends, right? So it's kind of 1-1 lost 1, if you want to look at it that way. And in many ways, the way the Reverend Schaefer thing is shaped up, if not a win, it is at least a poignant moment for us all to remember. Mm-hmm. And I think a good can come of that. But looking at Ogletree, and then this is a good resolution. That, there may need to be some punishment. Sure, I mean, it is still against the discipline. I get that. But that punishment doesn't have to be defrocking. Like, there's nothing in the discipline that says you have to be defrocked for this. It can be a slap on the wrist, like they're doing in Calpac, and that's fine. Like, fine, I'll take a day's suspension, whatever.
Wait a second, you're retired already, so we can't take your pension.
Right, and they can't. And they actually turns out they can't take his pension anyways. That's legally protected.
Yeah.
By not church laws, by like the laws of America. So I don't know if this is a turning point yet. I think it's too early to see this one as a turning point. Mm-hmm. I think this annual conference has blinked in a good way.
Yeah. That
they kind of got the person doing the accusing kind of backed them into a corner. This is an annual conference that has gone on record kind of honoring those who've protested. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is a signal that more progressive annual conferences are not going to go the trial route.
Right.
What I want to see is what happens with Bishop Talbert. And until that situation gets resolved, I don't know if I'm looking at signs or reading tea leaves. I'd love to. I'd love to say that the Reverend Schaefer thing helped us turn a corner, but I'm a little too I'm not pessimistic. I'm wary. I'm wary. I've been burned, right? I've been burned. Been burned before. So, speaking of, we've been talking constantly about Reverend Schaefer. This is not often we talk about this kind of story on this show. There's a Kickstarter. I see Stephen and I do these tech shows on a whole other thing.
Techslastcall.com.
Techslastcall.com, where we talk a lot about things that get Kickstarted. But there's a new Kickstarter that seems to have just gone up today called An Act of Love, a documentary about Reverend Frank Schaefer. This is being put on by 2 pastors, leaders in the United Methodist Church in California. Scott Shepard, who's kind of the producer guy, and then KDS Logan, who's also involved in the project there. United Methodist, at least one of them's a pastor, and Scott's actually a pastor, and they're want to do a feature-length documentary about the situation surrounding Reverend Schaefer, and with interviews and kind of do it up big. And so they have a Kickstarter to try and do this. I think it's going to take about a year to a year and a half to make, which I think is, doing some documentary work myself. Like, that's pretty realistic. So far, it's been up for not very long, and they've had 15 backers and $788 towards a goal of $75,000. So, if you're interested in seeing more, kind of a more in-depth look at, exactly what happened and kind of have this be better recorded for our history, go and back them. This sounds like a really cool idea. I think I'm going to back them. I think I may also volunteer to help out. They're taking volunteers. So, I think $75,000 makes... sounds like they've thought this through. So, go to Kickstarter.com and just search for An Act of Love. We'll link off the show title on our site to give them some support. I just think this is an interesting idea, and I can't wait to see what comes out of it. So, Stephen, your thoughts on the documentary?
I think it's cool. I think it's, hopefully it'll be... I really want to see it take a middle-of-the-road approach, show both sides of the... position. I would love it even more if it skewed towards my side of the position, which is one of I like the love.
What is called An Act of Love.
Yeah.
Which is somewhat of a, shall we say,
it kinda,
evocative title.
It gives away the ending.
Well, it certainly gives away their position
Yeah.
towards this.
I think that's...
It's not called an act of betrayal.
Yeah, it's not called slapping Jesus in the face.
This movie punches baby Jesus.
Exactly. I want to see how much it focuses on Reverend Schaefer, and then how much it focuses on, the backlash that came from someone bringing up charges, like when Good News comes in, and when the Good News people are like, oh, up in arms, and then other sides are like coming in, and just how it became such a fluster about all that.
Flustercluck?
Flustercluck.
Yeah.
We're on the internet.
We
don't have FCC regulations, but we do not want to be. We don't want to be disrespectful, so we'll say that.
Well, on a personal level, I want to see how they make this comprehensible to ordinary people.
Yeah, that's another thing. Is this going to be like, hey, we're going to give this to your Methodist church, or it's going to be specifically for Methodist audiences, and they're going to go into the polity and stuff, and it's with an assumption of that these people who are watching this understand it, or is it going to be like a for consumption documentary, like the documentary you're working on? Trey?
Yeah, which is I am in the process of working on a documentary about the community I worked in Paraguay this summer. It's what I spent my day in the studio doing, and that should be done in April, and we've got to work through some of the copyright stuff on it, but we think it is going to go up on the site at some point. So check that out.
If not, it'll be one of the first productions from Rose Window Productions.
Which is another side thing we're working on to try to kind of make our lives in this a little more sustainable. But yes. I think I'm really happy that this documentary is being done. Me personally, I would like to see it take at least somewhat of a balanced approach. Yeah. Because I want it to be a place where people can think through what happened rather than just an act of catharsis for a particular viewpoint. A viewpoint that I hold. But I think what could be more productive is something that allows for a wider conversation by presenting facts in a more straightforward way. And the title... And look, I'm going to back it. I'm going to watch it. I'm in support. But I think in terms of the conversation, what might be interesting is something that counters how the news has presented this. Yeah. Which is, oh, look how awful and backwards the Methodists are. Which, look, is a pretty awful and backwards move. Right. But I would like to see this kind of better explained from a Methodist perspective. Like, I want Rob Renfro on camera in this film. Yeah. Very seldom I want that to happen, but I want that in this. Because I want at least that viewpoint explained by people who hold that viewpoint.
Exactly.
And with editing such that it actually presents what he meant, and not editing that just makes him look dumb. Yeah. Because regardless of whether I agree with the person or not, I just hate prejudicial editing. So I have a lot of hope for this production. We'll see. But if you are interested, go to search An Act of Love on Kickstarter, or go to endfear.org. And click the podcast page, and there will be a link.
Yep, and we'll also have a link on our Facebook page.
Yeah, we'll throw that in the Facebook. I want to see this thing happen. So there are different prizes for different levels of donation. For $10, you get a personalized thank you email. For $25, you get a digital download of the movie. For $50, you get a DVD and a digital download and a thank you note. For $100, you get a poster, signed poster. It's pretty awesome. If at $250, you get a poster signed by Frank, which I could just stop right there.
And 2 DVDs.
A previous work by this director
and one of the other producers.
For $500, you get a personal thank you note from Frank, which means good to know they have
him on board.
They have him on board. Our producer for this show, Sydney, wants to know how much it would take to get an action figure. We need to suggest that because I need a Frank Schaefer action figure.
Oh, good Lord!
And you could have like different stoles that he could wear. And like a book of discipline and a Bible as the two things that can go in his hands. This is great. For $1,000, you get your own special thanks in the credits. For $2,500, you get 2 tickets to the premiere and the after party, but it's Methodist, so that after party is
Welch's
not
and cookies.
Welch's and cookies. It's just not.
It'll be
gonna
a potluck
the same.
dinner.
It'll be a potluck after party. For $5,000, you get to be called an associate producer, and for $10,000, you get to be called an executive producer. So that, this is just cool. I got nothing else. But you have from now until March 20th to go ahead and pledge your support. So I recommend that all of y'all head over to Kickstarter and do that. And so speaking of Christianity and the media, it brings us to this week's discussion. So I've been watching a lot of the Olympics lately. And no, we're not going to talk about the theology of thanking God for winning. I've been seeing a lot of advertisements. Mm-hmm. Advertisements for films. I like movies. I like going to the movies when I don't ever do it anymore, but I like it. Costs money and takes time. Yep. So I keep seeing ads for Noah. Which is the action movie starring Russell Crowe and Emma Watson, loosely based on the biblical story of Noah.
He punches the ocean, and that's what causes the flood, I think.
He punches there are dragons, and I don't know. And then I keep seeing ads for Son of God, which is the telling of Jesus' life by the people that made the Bible.
The Bible miniseries on History Channel.
On History Channel.
It's Touched by the Angel Lady. What was her name? Roma Dowry? Something.
Sure.
And Mark Burnett, the producer of Survivor.
And so that's...
And, of course, The Restaurant.
And so that's coming out, next week. In 10 days, that one's coming out. Noah is coming out March 28th, so in about a month and a half. And then there's one that I'm really interested. I kind of know what happens in Son of God. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again.
It's like you say that all the time.
It's like I say that all the time. I think I'm supposed to know what happened in Noah, but I have no idea what they're going to do with it.
The dragon comes and eats Lot's wife.
No, but that's Bel and the dragon. There is a biblical book, it's Apocrypha, about a dragon. Anyways, it's actually called About a Dragon. It's kind of like about a boy.
Is Hugh Grant involved?
Hugh Grant is the dragon, actually. Funny enough. And then there's the movie I'm really interested to see what this movie is. So it's called God's Not Dead. And the one-sentence description on IMDb states, college student Josh Wheaton's faith is challenged by his philosophy professor, played by TV's Hercules, who believes God does not exist. And what is fascinating and somewhat worrying about this film is that the lead credit on this is Willie Robertson of Duck Dynasty fame, playing Willie Robertson of Duck Dynasty fame.
I wonder if it's going to be fictionalized Willie Robertson or...
Look, the Willie Robertson you know is the fictionalized Willie Robertson.
That is true, yeah.
The real Willie Robertson didn't have this beard and has an MBA. Anyways. So, I'm really fascinated to see what this movie is, and because they're riffing off the quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, where he says God is dead, but the way that quote actually was used by Nietzsche, it doesn't actually mean that God is dead, like the metaphysical being that. It's that how we treat God makes God irrelevant.
Yeah, Isn't the entire quote, God is dead and we have killed him?
Right, God is dead and we have killed him. And this is actually something that we talk about in theology of Karl Barth, right?
Yeah.
That often how we do church has more to do with what we want and very little to do with what God wants.
Yes.
And that's kind of what Nietzsche is saying too. And so it already makes me worried about this film because they're misusing a quote from Nietzsche to really stir up the masses.
Yeah.
Look, Hitler misused Nietzsche to stir up the masses, so, this goes back a while of, misusing Nietzsche to stir up the masses, but I never like it when people do it. It's just, I have issues. So what do you think about all these films?
Well, I just love that Alexia Pearl, her credit is concert attendee. I don't know who Alexia Pearl is, but good for her. Anyway, I want to see where they go with these films. I think... just based on, the Bible miniseries,
God.
Son of God is going to be interesting. It's going to be very biblical literalist, which is good. when you want to just present a story.
So, I mean, look, I have no problem. Excuse me, I can't talk today. I have no problem with the idea of portraying Christ's life.
Yeah.
I wish someone would just pick a gospel rather than, like...
Just lumping them all together.
Lump it all together, because that, like, people keep being fascinated, because I often preach about, like, explaining what's in what book and why, and people are like, wow, I never knew that before. And it's like, yeah, because we do such a bad job of explaining that, like, these are actually separate books.
Yeah. When we, as a church, when we teach the gospel to children, we give the story, and the story is always going to be a combination of all four of the gospels.
But always mostly leaning on Luke, because Luke is the one
Luke is the happiest one. And
Luke is also the one with the most detail.
Exactly. I personally like Luke the best. I think Kathleen is a Matthew fan.
See, I'm a Luke person.
Yeah.
But that's also the core social justice piece is also in Luke.
Very
and
Luke.
That's kind of my
Matthew
my thing.
is the most Jewish.
Yeah, it's actually the most Jewish. Mark is
the oldest and shortest. And John is just too mystical.
John. I like John. I think John's my number 2. If I'm honest, John's my number 2 gospel. Because we're supposed to rate these things. Look, the Bible miniseries, I think I wasn't here when I
watched it. I watched a part of it at Kathleen's parents' house, and the way they went into... Yeah, it was kind of bad the way they went into racial stereotypes to get some of their characters. Like Samson was the only judge who was a African American.
Interesting.
Because he was portrayed as strong and stupid.
Oui.
Yes, and that yeah, and I'm like, why did...
Was perchance Judas portrayed as overly Jewish?
I didn't see that part.
Me neither, but let's wait and see. Because usually...
And apparently the devil was Barack Obama.
The devil was Barack Obama.
I know that wasn't the
Barack
case.
Hussein Obama.
But
that's my only Rush Limbaugh impression I've got. Is him saying Barack Hussein Obama.
He just looked... Yeah, that's the...
Well, you keep talking, I'll look this up. I need to see this.
Well, I'm looking at the IMDb stuff
Devil in Bible miniseries. Yes, looks like Obama.
Yes.
He does look like Obama. Oh my god. Like, not even like a little bit. They made Obama. They really, like, oh my god.
And Judas, yeah. He does have nice cheekbones.
God.
According to one of our listeners out there, Judas has nice cheekbones. I looked. Yes, he does.
I worry. Okay, I will say this. I have never seen a good biblically based movie.
I've seen good movies that take biblical stories and use them as their basis. Like, for instance,
Saved.
There's a Saved. There's a Coen Brothers movie. What's the name of it? But it's basically a retelling of the Book of Job. Based on a 1950s teacher. That's a good Bible movie.
That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
What I mean is I've never seen a movie that has portrayed the actual biblical narrative in its historical context well. The closest is Passion of the Christ. And that was over the top in a lot of strange ways and had its own interesting theology to it. But that's the closest we've gotten. Or the Vintage 21 videos, which everyone needs to go watch on YouTube. What in the name of me is going on here? Listen up. I have traveled many miles and performed many miracles to say this. You're all sinners. There is no hope. Thank you. If you don't know what I mean, go search Vintage 21 on YouTube.
By the way, the name of that movie was A Serious Man. It's really good.
That is that. I'll have to see that. I have not. Okay. Another thing in the chat. What about the Ten Commandments, the musical starring Val Kilmer?
I actually saw that.
So did we.
In seminary with a group of us. We were the only ones in the theater, and we just...
I bought it on DVD. So where I went to college, there wasn't much to do. And so we would go to Walmart and buy dumb movies and watch them. And
the $5 DVD bin?
Yep, in Walmart and in Williamsburg, Virginia. And that's how I experienced Val Kilmer in The Ten Commandments, the musical. It's awful. I know. Okay, so there is the decent biblical movie, right? The Ten Commandments starring Charlton Heston.
That is a good one.
That is, like, as cheesy as Charlton Heston is, like, that's not a bad movie.
Mm-mm.
And, why am I forgetting this? Prince of Egypt.
Yeah, Prince of Egypt.
Prince of Egypt is, I'm thinking New Testament. We've never done it well. We've done some Old Testament stuff well, so maybe there's hope for Noah.
No, it's got Russell Crowe in it.
I like Russell Crowe.
Hey, what's that, Noah? You wanna fight?
Fight! Oh, duh! So, I mean, I feel like all I've done lately is talk about Noah, because that was like half of the creationism debate was about Noah from last week. I don't have hope for I don't really have hope for either of these films, for Noah or The Son of God.
Yeah.
Because Noah seems to be done in the style of that King Arthur movie that came out ages and ages ago.
Yeah.
With Keira Knightley and what's his face? The really cool British guy who was going to be Bond until I never remember his name. Anyways, it had some really good actors, and it was like trying to make King Arthur look like the time that he actually should have been, which was like the Roman occupation. Yeah. Or like, very similar to like the retellings of Robin Hood that have happened recently. Like, it's trying to go and like, let's make this look like it's actual historical time in this kind of grayed out dramatic thing. It's kind of like King Arthur meets 300 kind of look. Like, Russell Crowe has a really weird miscolored beard. And always looks very wet. Just really wet. It's got Emma Watson. She's, it's got some decent acting talent in it, but I think they're just going to be kind of over the top. One over the top literalist and one over the top action.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I'm worried about God's Not Dead. Like, it could be like Saved, which is my favorite Christian-related movie of all time. I think that movie is excellent. I think it shows what church can really be, and also is very pointed correction of what church often is. Because the clear message of that film is who is really being loving here. Yes. And it's this group of outcasts. The guy in the wheelchair, the chick that likes to dress like a dude, the gay guy, and the chick that gets pregnant off the gay guy. Like, that's the people who are being really Christian, and the mom who's willing to support them.
Yes.
Not the Christian school.
Yeah. Not the school, not the youth pastor who is struggling with, I love this woman, but
I don't
think that her daughter is right, and so I should just walk away.
Right. And so, like, I think that is one, hands down, one of my favorite movies ever, regardless of genre, and certainly my favorite, like, movie with a Christian message. I think every youth group should watch that film. If anything, a message about what causes pregnancy. I'm about to teach Methodist sex ed at a church here in Atlanta, and I really should just bring Saved and say, not that.
Yeah.
Not that.
Maybe if no.
Nope. Just no.
But what if I...
Nope. Still no. Still no. That's where babies come from, ladies and gentlemen, and, that's what we got. So I'm hoping it can be like that. Where it's like really poignant about what the church can be and what the church isn't. But I think since it's got Willie Robertson and it's like really playing up.
And it's got Dean Cain.
Does it
TV's Superman from Lois and Clark.
So it's got TV's Superman and TV's Hercules.
Yes.
Oh, God. Like, they have B-movie actors and Willie Robertson, and that does not sound like a movie that's going to both be a balanced view of, like, what the church can be in a modern society. No, this is going to be like, you're challenging my faith and you're wrong and I hate you! And then, of course, the professor's going to come to Jesus at the end of the movie, right?
Right.
Right? Like that. Is there any other... Ladies and gentlemen, here's the plot of God's Not Dead. He shows up in his first day of class. He's really nervous about being a philosophy major, but he shows up to class and...
He's nervous because he's not going to have a job in 4 years.
He's not going to have a job in 4 years. And so he sits down in the class, and the opening lecture is, in a logical society, there cannot be a God. God does not exist. And he sits there in class and he's dumbstruck, and he goes to his pastor and he prays about it, and he has a crisis of faith that happens over the next 30 minutes. And he goes to the professor's office and tries to talk to him about Jesus, and the professor's like, God doesn't exist, kid, you're an idiot. And then something tragic happens in the professor's life, and the Christian student, Will Wheaton, whatever he's called, Josh Whedon.
I keep wanting to say it's Josh Whedon. Does the Christian create Firefly?
The Christian creates Firefly. It is Josh Wheaton, by the way. That's why we keep wanting to call him. It's either Josh Wheaton or Will Wheaton. But anyways, so he goes to the professor's, is there for the professor in his darkest moment, and by his example of love, Kevin Sorbo, TV's Hercules, becomes a Christian professor, and he goes and teaches at a seminary. Credits roll as we're all singing together in church. I've written the film.
Very nice.
Cut, print, beautiful, people. Thank you very much.
$200 million.
$200
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed it's going to be bigger than friggin' Transformers, the next one that's coming out. So that's that movie, and I don't know. I'm going to go see it with my church. We're going to do like a series of movies and then Bible study after. That one, I think, has the best potential to be cool about what it is to be Christian on a modern college campus and what it is to be a Christian in a modern secular society. But how this...
It's definitely going to take a defensive stance. It's definitely going to be, everyone's out to get me, but if I just keep the faith, I'm going to convert all of them.
But I don't think that's the way to do that movie.
It's not. The way to do that movie is you show said secular professor, said Christian student, coming together over something and working together. I think you show that Christianity
is not incompatible with intellectualism.
It's not.
Which kind of takes us back to last week, right?
Yeah.
That, like, Christianity... One of my critiques of Bill Nye and my critique of what's-his-face who argued against Bill Nye... Ken Ham.
Delicious.
Seems to say there is either science or there is science grounded in belief. That somehow to be Christian means an inherently somewhat anti-intellectual exercise.
And as we all know, all churches... wait, where did you go to school for seminary?
Seminary?
Yeah.
I'm at the Candler School of Theology.
Where's that located?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, what's the name of... So it's just a separate...
No, it's actually at Emory University, a leading research university.
Oh, yeah, and who helps fund Emory University?
Coca-Cola.
And?
Coca-Cola. The United Methodist Church.
And the United Methodist Church, yes. Same with, Duke, Northwestern. And there's also, Episcopalian schools, there's Catholic schools, as we all know, Notre Dame, Villanova.
Villanova, all the various Loyolas.
Anything that has Loyola in it.
Including...
Xavier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't think we have to draw that line. And I think one of the things the Catholic Church has always been so wonderful about is not drawing that line.
Right, and they shouldn't. I mean, they've had problems drawing that line before, hence Galileo. But
Galileo.
But other than that,
Galileo.
There's a lot of
Galileo. Magnifico.
Lord, bear me strength. Okay.
Keep going, please.
But going back to my point, it's like everyone wants to make these dichotomies. It's the secular philosophy professor versus the Christian student. And it's always the Christian that seems to be in the position of, he's the humble one. He's the student. And you have this big, mighty professor with all his fancy learning degrees.
Let me tell you about all my fancy learning degrees.
Yeah.
Steven, tell me about your fancy learning degrees.
I have a lot.
Yes.
But
so it's this figure of power and versus this persecuted student.
Except for, in modern society, the religious types have the power. A lot of places.
But that's not often the narrative that gets told in conservative Christianity.
Yeah, you want to make your position seem like, you're going against the grain, when in fact you are the majority. The vast majority. 86% of this country is Christian. In the world...
Or at least nominally Christian.
They claim it.
1/3 of the world's population.
1/3 of the world's population
is at least nominally Christian.
Yes. So it's one of those, it's like, it just doesn't hold up, but it's a good feel-good movie for those who feel like they are in that oppressed minority of 86%.
Well, I think Fox News and their ilk possibly overplays this, but there is a trend in America today towards using more open-ended language.
Good.
And I'm not arguing against it. But what I'm saying is they take that kernel of fact and transform that into persecution.
Right.
Because the early church was persecuted, and so we need to feel persecuted.
The early church was also illegal.
But Christmas trees are being renamed. I'm doing Rush Limbaugh again today. Christmas trees are being renamed holiday trees. How does he not peak his mic when he does that?
I'm sure he has a sound guy that's like, nope.
I'm sure he has a compressor.
Nope,
He can afford
yeah.
a compressor. If you want to help us afford a compressor. So on that note, we should probably get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us on this SYN Boldly episode of SYN Boldly. If you have any feedback for us, SYN Boldly at endfear.org, facebook.com/the sign your name your project, or at SYN Boldly on Twitter. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord and end fear by signing your name. Good night. Cat's not in here.
SYN Boldly cat is gone.
Probably passed out.
He's
Steven, your custom SYN Boldly headphones look really nice on camera.
They are very nice, thank you.
Sorry,
they cost $400,000.
Cost many hours of my life.
They cost a lot of hours.
They turned out great.
I like them a lot. Russell Crowe fighting Noah.
Frost Flood!